Dereck Chisora is following in the footsteps of his former manager and former nemesis in the boxing ring, David Haye, in picking Dillian Whyte to knock Tyson Fury out. Now, what is going on here? Because this is what Dereck Chisora said in this interview here on TalkSport. Well, if you watch the interview in its entirety, the impression I get is that it was kind of a protest vote. Dereck Chisora was hoping to make a point by picking Dillian Whyte rather than picking Tyson Fury, because this consensus has developed around Fury that he's virtually invincible, that the only person who can beat him is himself. And I think Dereck Chisora's a little bit annoyed with that because he knows how unpredictable heavyweight boxing is in reality and how precarious it is. And certainly if you look back through the history of the heavyweight division, it is replete with massive upsets. And these upsets occur when this consensus forms around a particular fighter that he can't be beat. For example, Sonny Liston. Consensus, this guy's invincible, gets beaten by a young Cassius Clay. People thought Foreman was invincible. A consensus emerged around him, and Ali destroyed that. Also, Ali went on to lose to Leon Spinks, a guy who was like a 7-fight novice. Huge upset. You know, nobody thought that Ali would be losing to that guy. Years later, a consensus formed around Mike Tyson that he was the baddest man on the planet, invincible. Went in there against a 42-1 outsider in Buster Douglas and got knocked out in 10 rounds. Mike Tyson went on to lose to Evander Holyfield, who everybody thought was washed up several years later in 1996. And Holyfield was something like a 25-1 underdog. Just before that, Lennox Lewis in 94, I think it was 94, 95, lost to Oliver McCall. Lewis later on lost to Hasim Ratman. And again, by that time, a consensus had developed around Lennox Lewis that he was the best fighter in the world, the best heavyweight on the planet. And he ends up getting sparked by Hasim Ratman. Do you know what I mean? So, and of course, going into the Klitschko era, Vitaly Klitschko was beat by Chris Bird. I mean, who saw that coming? Vladimir was beat by Corey Sanders. Who saw that? I know everybody likes to be an expert in retrospect, but going into the Corey Sanders fight, who saw that coming? And of course, Vladimir Klitschko was on a 10-year unbeaten streak when he faced the man Tyson Fury himself. Tyson Fury, a big underdog, turned Vladimir Klitschko over in Germany when many people, I remember at the time, most people that were turning up in the comments of my videos were saying that Klitschko won't lose again before he retires. That he's going to beat Fury and beat all these other guys, and he's going to retire. So forget about anybody turning Klitschko over. That's what they were saying. And of course, Fury made a nonsense of that. So whenever you get these consensuses forming around a heavyweight where people think they're invincible, as a veteran boxing fan, you do start to get deja vu. Do you know what I mean? Because you've been here so many times before where people, even with Deontay Wilder, people were getting carried away. This is the biggest puncher of all time and nobody can live with him and Fury can only just hope to survive and fiddle his way through a fight and all this kind of stuff. And if he just touches you once, he'll knock your lights out and nobody can take the power. It got over the top with Deontay Wilder. Yeah, he's a big puncher and he's a dangerous man, but people were going way over the top, giving him way too much credit for beating people like Luis Ortiz, who's unproven himself. So Tyson Fury went in there again, smashed Deontay Wilder to pieces. So these consensuses in the heavyweight division are pretty flimsy. If you look at the history of heavyweight boxing, they're pretty flimsy. And I think that Dereck Chisora is hoping to make that point. I think he's hoping that Dillian Whyte wins by knockout so he can disprove all these people who are just latching onto the consensus. Have they really done independent thought and broken down the fight and broken down the strengths and weaknesses of both guys? Do they really know that much about boxing? Have they got short memories? Do they not remember the history of this division? Do they not remember some of the upsets that have happened just over the past 5-6 years in the heavyweight division? Why do they think that Tyson Fury is immune to all this? Has he not hit the deck before? Has he not had close, controversial fights? Do you know what I mean? Has he not taken damage in his career? Is this guy unhittable? I mean, wasn't he just dropped twice in his last fight? You see it? So I think Dereck Chisora's basically making a protest vote in going against the grain because he wants to prove a point. He wants to prove to these guys that the consensus isn't as solid as you think it is in reality, because the heavyweight division is unlike any other division in boxing. When these huge men are throwing huge punches in little 10-ounce gloves, anything can happen. It's like the old Wyclef song back in the days. Say what, anything can happen. Showing my age there. So, yeah, that's what I think it is with Dereck Chisora. Some people could say, well, he's just going along with David Haye because him and David Haye are friends now. Some people could say, well, maybe it's a racial thing or whatever the case may be. You know, there's favoritism among all races. But the majority of people in all races are, to one degree or another, biased in favor of their own. I'm not saying all people, I'm just saying the majority, which means more than 50%. Well, some people could say it might be that creeping in. But the interesting thing is that looking at my subscribers, I did a poll, done a few polls about Dillian Whyte and Tyson Fury and who wins and how much of a chance Dillian Whyte has. And I would say, based on my subscribers, and people I've seen elsewhere online, about 30% there or thereabouts are picking Dillian Whyte to win. And that's a pretty high minority, a pretty substantial minority compared to the boxing fraternity. Because if you look at the boxing fraternity, the trainers, the pundits, the fighters, the promoters, etc., how many of them are picking Dillian Whyte? 1%? 2% at best? It's far less than the amount of fans that are picking Dillian Whyte. Must be, like I say, at least 30% of fans are picking Dillian. 20, 30%, based upon what I've seen on my channel anyway. So are they just wishful thinking? Is it a bunch of people who don't like Tyson Fury? Is it a bunch of protest votes? Or do they see something which the boxing fraternity, the pundits, etc., don't see? Are they paying more attention to the history of the division? Are they looking at the fact that Tyson Fury may have taken damage in his last couple fights against Deontay Wilder? You know? You guys let me know what you think in the comment section below, but I just found it interesting that Dereck Chisora is only the second person I've seen in the boxing fraternity to actually pick Dillian Whyte to win. Everybody else is going against him. And as I say, as a veteran boxing fan, when you see a consensus form around a heavyweight like that, you do start to get deja vu. You start to think, hang on, this seems familiar. I remember when this happened around George Foreman. I remember when this happened around Mike Tyson. I remember when this happened around Lennox Lewis. I remember when this happened around Vladimir Klitschko. I remember when this happened around Sonny Liston. I mean, we've been here before with these consensuses, and then it all gets turned on its head. So I'm cautious when it comes to believing that a heavyweight is invincible in his era. I'm very cautious when it comes to believing that, because there's no heavyweight that I've seen before or since Mike Tyson in his prime that had the era of invincibility that he had. Mike Tyson's era of invincibility was just off the scale. People believe this guy was like Godzilla, bro. They thought that this man was invincible in and out of the ring. That's how over the top it was with Mike Tyson. And ever since he lost to Buster Douglas and then lost later on in 1996, November 9th, to Evander Holyfield, I thought, okay, there's no such thing as an invincible fighter, particularly not an invincible heavyweight. These guys are too big and strong and powerful and too easy to hit compared to the smaller guys, easy to hit clean to be called invincible. And this weight disparity, and the weight disparity doesn't always work in favor of the bigger guy. Sometimes the smaller guy actually has an advantage because the speed difference is so big. Yeah? I mean, we saw that with Usyk when he fought Anthony Joshua. Obviously, Usyk's got great technique, and there is a whole heap of different things that he does well that came together and combined to allow him to beat Anthony Joshua. But one of them was the speed, the foot speed, the hand speed, the head movement. AJ weren't used to fighting someone that could move like that. So his extra weight didn't help him. Obviously, he didn't really apply it in the way that he should. But again, I'm just making the point that sometimes the smaller guy at heavyweight can actually have the advantage over the bigger guy. So anyway, I'll leave it there. Let me know what you guys think in the comments.